So in this video, what I want to show you is what we call a cut-in floor system, which is similar at the start at least to our platform floor system, which I did a video on earlier. So I will be skipping through the first little part of this up to the joist pretty quickly. And if you want to go back and have a look at that in more detail, have a look at the platform floor system video. So as you can see, we've done our excavation. Next step will be to do our reinforcement in our strip footing and no reinforcement in our blob footings. Place our concrete, do our dwarf wall and our engaged piers, our isolated piers, get our DPC put in, our damp-proof course, and our ant cap in place, and then place our bearers as we did before. And now the first real difference starts when we put our joists in. So you can see with our joists, we've still got double joist on our external walls, but I also have a double joist now on our internal wall, and you might notice that they're spaced apart a little bit. And I'll put in the bottom plates, and we're going to have a closer look, and you can see that when our double plate's in, we actually need to have this second bearer spaced apart a little bit to give us an actual bearing for our flooring. And that distance there is generally about half the thickness of our joist. And so that's for an external wall. We go around and have a look at our internal wall. You'll see it's spaced apart a little bit further, generally the same thickness as our joist, and that's so we get bearing for our flooring on both sides of an internal wall. And it won't matter whether that's a load bearing or non-load bearing wall. It needs to have two joists, and they need to be spaced apart so they pick up the wall in that manner. Of course, before we started doing this flooring, we would have our walls in place. However, I'm not going to leave them in there just for a little bit of clarity. Just remember, we would normally have our walls stood and possibly our roof on and our roof covering on before we started laying this flooring. Cut-in flooring is generally used where you're going to have fairly expensive flooring, and it normally gets laid towards the end of the job. Not very common nowadays, but that's why it's done this way, so it can be laid towards the end of the job. So I've left the plates in. Generally what we do is, if you had a long run in your house, so say this plate didn't go through here, so there was a hallway that ran all the way through here, I would start against this wall, and that way I could do the entire run in one length and get it nice and straight. There's nothing worse than starting here and working this way, and starting here and working this way, and because the way you've cramped the floor up, you actually end up with a little bit of a stagger in the boards, or they don't line up from this room to this room. So always start with your longest length and then work your way back to your shortest lengths. Okay, but in this case, because this stops here all the way through, I'm just going to start against this wall. I've put in a couple of spaces, about 10 mil, just to give me some room for expansion. And remember, we need to keep 10 mil on each wall as we work our way around, so the flooring can expand and contract without buckling or damaging. Just remember, we're still going to have 10 mil of drip rock to go on our wall, and up to 20 mil of skirting. So we've got a fair bit of coverage here, up to 30 mil. So a 10 mil expansion gap's not going to show up at any stage. So little 10 mil packers, and cut in your first board. So what I've done, this is a short board, so cut it to length, leaving 10 mil shy at each end. And then the offcut that I cut off this end, I'll start back down here, and I'll cut it to length so it joins on this joist. Now, if we have a look down, there are two different types of strip flooring you can get. Tongue and groove strip flooring. There's plain old tongue and grooved, which is just square on the ends, or what they call end matched flooring, where the tongue and the groove is actually machined into the ends of the boards as well. Okay, so the advantage of this is that you can actually join this and it doesn't have to be on a joist. So when you install this stuff, you don't need to worry about landing on a joist. You just join anywhere you like and you don't have any waste. Whereas this one, you have to cut it so it joins on a joist. Have a look at the other end of that and you can see it's got the groove machined. So the best method of installing that is the same. If this was end matched, we'd cut this cut here, take the offcut, put it in here, wherever it ended. So it ended about here, just start a new length with the groove already in it. Now, cut at the length, bring the offcut down this end, and we'll just keep going that way. Similar to this, the normal tongue and groove flooring, but we have to make sure it lands on a joist each time. So that one lands there. You should also make sure that the shortest piece still spans across 3 joists. So it can't just go from there to there. It needs to go across 3 as a minimum. So we can go that piece there. Hopefully the offcut will be long enough before we start a new piece. This will still get us 3 here. That piece goes in, and then we can probably get back to a full length. So you start working your pattern, and I generally go about 4 boards, and then I'll put in a packer or a sacrificial piece of timber, and then I can throw in my clamps, my flooring clamps, and we can clamp that up. These particular clamps, you just wind this handle back and forwards, and this little ratchet down here pushes forward. There are lots of different systems and methods of clamping up the floor. The other thing is with your packer, let's jump back here. With your packer, good idea to get a bit of old flooring, or nominate a piece of flooring you're going to sacrifice that's actually got the groove if you're clamping against the groove, and just keep that in place so you don't actually damage the tongue when you're clamping against it. The other method is to just turn the boards around. So you start with the tongue against the wall. It's the same thing, you want to make sure you protect your groove or your tongue, because otherwise the next board that goes in there will be a hell of a job to get it in. So all you need to do, once you've got that clamped and the clamps are still on, you nail the joist nail the boards every joist, so 2 nails per joist, making sure on the ends that you pre-drill so you don't split it. And then you start the system again. Go another 3 or 4 boards, clamps, sacrificial piece, clamp it up, nail the last board. Don't worry about nailing the in-between boards, you can get them at the end. Just nail the end board and keep repeating the system. So boards, packer, clamp, and then nail, and just keep working your way back until you get to the point where obviously our clamps are not going to fit in between this gap. So the best thing you can do is you could either get a crowbar or a jimmy bar and go down to the ground if it was close enough, or you can just get a chisel, drive it into the joist, and use that to lever it back. And once you get to this stage, I'd be doing that for every board. So I'd be pushing up every board with my chisel and nailing that off, and do that in several places along the length of the board so it's got the same pressure on it, and do that till you get right up to the wall, making sure you maintain your 10mm gap against your wall and keep them pushed up nice and tight. Then we can move over to the next room, put our packers in, spacers in, and start the same procedure. So in this case, it's such a short room, I'm not going to put joins in it, although that'll produce a lot of waste. So you may be compelled to put a couple of half lengths in here, but it's the same procedure. We lay the boards down, put our packer in, clamp them up, nail them off, boards, pack, clamp and nail, boards, and we go right through to the end, maintain our gap at the end. And same for the rest of the house, making sure you put your packers in, making sure you maintain your packing all the way around. And there's our cut-in floor in place, remembering that our walls would already be there. and that our roof would be on and we'd be fairly well protected, probably even have the brickwork up before you actually started this process, so our nice expensive timber floor is preserved.